on with Daryl Weber, the Secretary General of the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, or RSPO. My name is Nadine Hawa. I am the site editor of the Sustainable Palm Oil Conversation and Debate website, betterpalmoildebate.org. Now, this year marks the 10-year anniversary of the RSPO, which was established back in 2004 to promote the use and production of palm oil sustainably. As some of you may know, palm oil currently supplies more than a third of the world's edible oils. And with a world population which is set to hit 9 billion by the year 2050, we must continue all our efforts to try and produce this crop sustainably. Besides the RSPO's 10-year anniversary, taking place tomorrow in London is the RSPO's second annual summit. This year's summit has a theme of 100% certified sustainable palm oil, our shared responsibility. So over the next 45 minutes, I'll be speaking to Daryl about the RSPO's journey, its achievements, its challenges, where the sustainable palm oil industry is heading in general. And we'll also go over the summit, the key themes, which will be addressed by the speakers, and what Daryl and the RSPO are hoping to get out of the event. Before I ask Daryl to briefly introduce himself, I'd like to remind those of you who are following us live that you're able to send us your questions in real time by using the little box to the right of your screens. So Daryl, thank you very much for being with us today. If you could kindly start by introducing yourself and your organization, the RSPO.
Hi Nadine, thank you for having me. Thanks everybody who's watching for taking the time to view this interview. My name is Daryl Weber. I'm the Secretary General of the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, which is a multi-stakeholder membership-based organization that seeks to define this, what is sustainable production of palm oil, and seeks to transform markets towards the use of sustainable palm oil in its markets. So that's what we do.
Daryl, as I mentioned in the introduction, this year marks the 10-year anniversary since the RSPO was established. So looking back 10 years ago, is the RSPO today where I hoped it would be when it was established?
I think we've gone beyond what we hoped for initially, and we've still got a long way to go. I mean, we are now 17% of global production is certified as sustainable, which sends, well, from some perspectives it's too little, but from other perspectives it's a huge achievement. Now over 10 million tons of palm oil products are certified in the markets. We have had the first review of our standards since we developed the standards in 2005. We've reviewed it in 2013. We have members in more than 1,500 countries. We have more than 1,500 members over 50 countries now, more than we ever widely dreamed of when we first started. We have national commitments from countries like UK, France, Germany, Sweden, Belgium, and so on, who are committed to buy or procure certified sustainable palm oil by 2015 at least, and so on and so forth. Those are our achievements, but we also have still a long way to go. We are only 17%, as I said, and we've got a lot more to do to transform markets in Europe, but not only in Europe, in China, India, the US especially.
We're going to cover a lot of the things that you have mentioned over the next 45 minutes. But one of the things you did bring up are your principles and criteria, as you said, that were reviewed in 2013. What can we expect in light of the next review?
The next review will be now. It will be in 4 years' time, and I think what we can expect and what I hope to see in the next review is a review based on scientific evidence. So we are now asking, reaching out to any organization, scientific bodies, to assess the RSPO independently on how it's performing with regards to on-the-ground outputs. Do we really save the orangutans? Do we really save the forest? Do we really protect local community rights? We want credible scientific groups to assess us in an independent way so that it can be made as inputs in our discussions around the review of the next PNCs.
And do you think this might be a way that might finally get the super green NGOs that still refuse to come on board the RSPO because they simply believe that sustainability and palm oil production are simply irreconcilable? Might this review that's coming up in 4 years produce the evidence that super green NGOs require to come on board?
Well, I think, I hope that the evidence provided by the scientific community will provide a more robust debate, a debate that's more sound, less on rhetoric, but more on objective evidence. I think that's my hope. And whether super green NGOs or less green NGOs or whatever NGOs, any stakeholder, I hope that they can use this evidence as ways to engage the RSPO, challenge the RSPO, if you will, but use this evidence as a solid base for the challenges. And I think, and that's what I'm really hoping for. And I'm not asking everybody to join the RSPO. No, I think there are many ways to play a role in the RSPO, from inside and outside. But it's, of course, I think it's better inside because you have more information, access to greater information from within the RSPO.
I also want to ask you about some of your supply chain options. You know, there are 4 supply chain options through the RSPO: identity preserved, segregated, book and claim, and mass balance. Some people still have questions about whether mass balance and book and claim are truly sustainable, in the sense that one of them mixes sustainable palm oil with unsustainably produced palm oil and the other helps offset. So how do you justify that these 2 supply chain options are in fact sustainable?
Well, I think the basis of all these supply chains derive from a certified unit of production somewhere in the world, right? Whether it's green palm, mass balance, segregated, or identity preserved. It has the basis that somewhere in the world, if you use one of these supply chains, you would trigger sustainable production. And I think that has to be clear. Use of these supply chains does not trigger unsustainable supply. So that has to be understood. That's the first thing I need to clarify. The second thing I need to clarify is what we see today is, and what we've always figured from the very beginning of designing all these supply chain options, is that the buyers are migrating from the more easier option, which is say book and claim or mass balance, towards the more difficult options of segregated and identity preserved. That is a clear trend we're seeing. And that's always been part of the design of the supply chains, to allow interim solutions towards a more permanent solution. So, you know, and each of these supply chain options have a role to fulfill. I'll give you a good example. I mean, the book and claim. It really allowed for pump priming of the supply chains. If it were not the case, we would not have achieved what we have achieved so far, you know, over the 10 years. If you look at all the other similar initiatives around commodities, we are, you know, I don't want to brag too much, but we are certainly the leader amongst all these commodity roundtables, and we do it a lot, and we have a lot to say, and we owe the success to the green palm or the book and claim solution. And I do think there's a room for the book and claim because we haven't really solved yet how are we going to reward independent smallholders. Now that's the trick, because independent smallholders do not produce oil. They produce the fruit that goes to the mill that presses it to produce the oil. So they don't own the mill. So how do you deal with independent smallholders? And one very easy way to deal with that and to reward them directly is through certificate trading, the book and claim supply chain. So we do see that whilst we do see the movement from the more simple option of book and claim towards identity preserve, which is the ultimate solution, we also see a continued role for certificate tradings for some very specific products like independent smallholders. And independent smallholders is not an insignificant number in terms of production. In some countries, they figure up to 70% of the country production. In some countries, it's 40%. So these are significant numbers that we're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. And I do realize that, for example, the segregated option can be complicated for the smallholders as well.
Yes.
So there, let's talk about palm oil becoming sort of this poster child at the moment for deforestation. It's the next sort of big thing when it comes to environmental and social issues that we're seeing on the scene, and we are seeing more and more initiatives and standards coming to life and being developed, one of which is the Palm Oil Innovation Group, of course, and there are also efforts by the Forest Trust, by TFT. How do you view these efforts? What are your views on them? I think you recently actually proposed to TFT to collaborate.
Yeah, and that's this call for collaboration is the essence of the RSPO. We invite all stakeholders to collaborate. We have a very diverse set of stakeholders. I think you know already, Nadine, that we have 7 stakeholder groups within the RSPO, from the producers to the buyers to the financiers to the environmental NGOs to social NGOs. And why do we ask all these stakeholders in? Because all of them can surface issues and all of them can contribute to solutions towards these issues. So we invite any leading thinker or people doing activities around palm oil who think they have answers towards a sustainable production of palm oil to come to the RSPO and join our platform to have this debate.
But with all these other initiatives and also the national initiatives like the Indonesia Sustainable Palm Oil Standard or the Malaysia MSPO, might they create confusion? Yeah. Or might they also undermine the credibility of the RSPO?
Well, I think let's talk about the confusion aspect. First of all, I think the RSPO is very proud to have been the catalyst for all these other initiatives that's coming up. I think if it were not for RSPO, you would not have all these other initiatives. And I think that all these initiatives come from a good place, with the right intent, which is to raise the levels of production towards a more sustainable path. That's great. Yes, I think it will create some confusion in the marketplace. But I think it's something that the RSPO should not be dwelling too much and think about its competition. I like to think about the national standards of servicing, ISPO, MSPO, as a stepping stone towards the bar that RSPO has put in place. And what the governments are doing is really favorable for the RSPO. What it does is they raise the floor of the industry so that it's closer, so the gap between our bar and the floor is not going to be that high. So that's fantastic. That means that more and more people will see the bar that RSPO has set as something achievable, as something that they can achieve for and strive for. Whereas before they may think, well, the gap is too big, why bother jumping this bar? So that's a good thing. And I think that's something that we need to appreciate. What the confusion that comes about is natural because there's many products out there, I guess. But the RSPO needs to focus on its core strengths. The first core strength is we have the largest buyers and the largest producers and the largest NGOs helping to raise issues and provide solutions within the umbrella of RSPO. We have now ambassadors in 50 to 70 countries, members of the RSPO. We have a credible standard that is debated, that is developed through a multi-stakeholder discussion, through consensus building, which means we have the potential to go far. We may not always have the potential to go fast because we have to bring all the stakeholder groups together, but we can go far. So I think we need to focus on these core strengths of the RSPO rather than look at all the other initiatives as competition.
Well, you mentioned being able to go far and not necessarily be able to go fast. Would you say this might be one of the reasons as to why some companies, like recently, for example, French multinational Danone has decided to work with TFT, for example, to clean up their supply chains, their palm oil supply chains? Some companies argue that the RSPO is not going far enough, that the bar is not high enough, and they need to go beyond that.
I think the RSPO always has on the top of its agenda is to be a tool for full and complete market transformation. We do not want to be a niche solution. And I think with all in this excitement of initiatives, the RSPO, credit to the board of governors of the RSPO, credit to the membership of RSPO, is cautious that it does not want to go forward in a manner that leaves everybody else behind. Yes, we must show leadership, but leadership means you don't run over the horizon and leave the masses behind. Leadership means you run just far enough so the masses want to follow you, right? So I think it's responsible leadership that we have to play. Responsible leadership, as I said, needs to be a beacon for others to follow, but not a beacon that you go so far in front that people can't see the light that you're supposed to shine for these masses. So I think that's what we have to be careful with in the RSPO.
Daryl, I do want to ask you about, there's a big discussion around alternatives to palm oil.
Yeah.
And we know that more or less the standard answer as to why palm oil and not any other vegetable oil is because palm oil has the highest yield for the same amount of land. So why is palm oil depicted as this big villain when other vegetable oils, which are grown on more land and actually require more land for the same amount of output, are not getting the same type of media attention?
Well, I guess I don't know really the answer, but I can speculate, right? I guess that it's about where palm oil is grown, and palm oil is grown in a region between 10 degrees north and 10 degrees south around the equator. So there's a thin band that goes around the equator, and that is the ideal area to grow oil palm. But it's also an area of highest biodiversity in the world. It's also the area of high poverty levels in the world. So, so because of all this, very significant clashes will happen, right? Because of the high biodiversity, high poverty, extremely good lands for oil palm, you will undoubtedly have a situation where it conflicts with one another. Now, it's true that palm oil, beyond a doubt, has proven as a useful tool for rural development, for lifting the poor out of poverty. That is true. It's also true that it can cause harm to rare, threatened, and endangered species habitat, like the orangutan. That's true. Yeah, but the RSPO and others like it have to ask the hard question: how can these three big issues live together? And I think that's what we have to do. Now, why does it attract media attention? Because we've got charismatic species in these places. We've got the orangutan, that's a very charismatic species that captures the attention and the imagination of a lot of people, causes people to be more emotionally attached to the issue. I think that's fine. My worry is that although a lot of these campaigns or these movements come from a good place, well-intentioned, I would say, people are driving this. It's not that they come with bad intentions. A lot of it is from good intentions. But I have to say that to understand the impacts of what you're doing, you need to be more informed. And you rightly say it's all about the yields. Now, unless you tell me that the human race will require less edible oil per capita, and the human race is not growing in population, then yes, do away with palm oil. But if you're telling me that the human race will continue to want more oil and continue to grow, then I think palm oil, being the highest yielding crop, is your best answer. Now the issue is where to grow it. That's the tricky bit, and I think that's where RSPO has a role to play.
So where do we grow it? Because yes, the population is growing and demand will continue to rise, particularly from like mega markets like India and China. We'll get to that a bit later. So is it all about increasing output on existing plantations? Is it about growing it on degraded land?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the good news is the potential yield of the tree, the oil palm tree, is much higher than what it is now. So with good breeding programs, you can actually double the production globally if you have good yield, a good practice, and practice good agriculture, and so on and so forth. Now that's one of the roles RSPO plays. It helps you as the producer monitor your progress in terms of yields. It helps you employ best practices. We already see, and we've got objective evidence conducted by a university through their research, of smallholders actually improving their yields by 27% on the first year of getting RSPO certified. So that's one way that RSPO has a role to play in all of this. We think the RSPO standards, not we think, we know that the RSPO standards ask producers to avoid high conservation value areas, avoid primary forests, avoid high carbon stock areas, and so on and so forth. So if you avoid all this, then that's the right place, I think, to grow oil palm. At the end of the day, what we would like to see is that the countries, governments in the new frontiers of palm oil take on board as soon as possible this idea of landscape level planning on using the same tools perhaps that RSPO has, or even better maybe, to decide on a landscape level where you can go for large-scale agriculture and where you cannot. Identify early the clear no-go zones on a landscape level, and that's where I really think countries have a role to play. And I think stakeholders of the RSPO or those interested in this conflict between large-scale agriculture and biodiversity should advocate to these governments that they need to really think on a landscape level where the go and no-go zones of large-scale agriculture, including palm oil.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the new frontiers. I'm guessing you're alluding to parts of Africa and Latin America, and in fact, at the 2012 RSPO conference on Latin America, it was established that the region's growing palm oil industry would make a significant contribution to sustainable palm oil. Are we seeing that happen? Is it too soon, or are they making a dent?
Well, we have recently seen a huge surge in applications to become RSPO members from Latin America. We also see a surge in requests for membership, application for membership from Africa. We know, of course, that there are many movements now and to open up more of the African countries for large-scale agriculture, which is both an opportunity and a concern for the RSPO. We hope, as I said, that countries would take a proactive initiative to consider landscape level planning for large-scale agriculture. The RSPO provides a solution on a management unit level, which is perhaps too slow in terms of transforming or avoiding negative impacts that could happen in Africa or Latin America. So we really need governments to come on board here. But we do see definitely Africa and Latin America as regions, not so much in the near future, but I would say in the midterm, would be significant players in the edible oil markets, and mostly for own consumption rather than exports.
And speaking of commitments, there we have seen a big string of companies committing or renewing their commitments to zero deforestation and sourcing sustainable palm oil. I want to ask you, first of all, what do these no deforestation claims mean to the RSPO? And also, I want to mention the timelines. You know, some of these companies have timelines that range between 2015 and 2020. And what excuse do we really have, or does a company really have to wait another 6 years? I know that the supply chains can be very long and complicated, but 6 years is a long time.
Exactly. I feel the same as you, Nadine. If the reality is, although we produce 10 million tons, more than 10 million tons of certified sustainable palm oil, only half of it has found a home in markets around the world. The other half is sold as conventional or unappreciated oil, I guess. And if that could be solved tomorrow, really. The 10 million tons could be soaked up immediately through the purchases of a book and claim, through the purchase of certificates. And that gives an immediate signal to the producers that yes, your efforts are appreciated. Yes, we want to see more of this to come. And yes, at the same time, we want to ratchet up the standards. I think that's a clear signal to producers. But right now, the signal is a bit uncertain. So 6 years is a bit long to wait. I do appreciate in companies like with the likes of Unilever, Nestle, who have immediately, tried to find solutions on the physical side, trying to find solutions to how to get the physical certified sustainable palm oil. But in the meantime, whilst waiting for these solutions to be 100%, they actually cover that gap with certificates. And they are reducing their reliance on certificates over time as and when they find solutions. Now, I think that's the way to do it, right? And that's the way you need to encourage the producers. That's essential. Now, as I said, the RSPO with regards to deforestation insists that its producers avoid primary forests, avoid high conservation value areas, which includes areas of importance for local communities, which includes areas that are, habitats for rare, threatened, and endangered species. And now with the review, the RSPO requests its members to avoid high carbon stock areas. Now that's the RSPO approach, and that, let me remind you, is a solution for 17% of the production of oil palm. We have no control over the remainder. Let me also add a little bit that's not known to the public. We will launch tomorrow. Maybe this is I spilled the beans a bit.
Yeah, you're breaking the news.
That our efforts to make it even more transparent with regards to deforestation, our efforts, the efforts of our members. So tomorrow we will launch our platform on what we call the Global Forest Watch initiative, which is managed by the WRI, World Resources Institute. And there, the world will be able to see exactly where our certified plantations are. Have there been deforestation happening on those plantations, or will there be more deforestation happening on this? They can see also every year, whether there's loss of forest or not in these plantations. So I think we are probably the only organization to make this very transparent. But we are 16% or 17% of global production, right? We can't shine that light on the rest. So what we need is for you, the consumer, for the buyers, to pull that supply chain so that we can shine the light on the rest of the global production of palm oil. And I hope, and not just palm oil, let's do it also for soy, let's do it for rapeseed, let's do it for every other commodity. And that brings a new level of governance, which is crowd governance, governance by the crowds, right? Governance through transparency. And I think that's going to be very powerful. So that's what RSPO can do with regards to deforestation. Now, the best solution, I think, instead of using the stick and said we will not buy from you if you deforest, let's provide incentive for people to keep forests. And what we need is this global deal that we've been postponing the world, God knows how many times now, since the days of Copenhagen, COP whatever in Copenhagen. Let's finally the world come to a deal where they can show rainforest nations that you don't have to trade your forest for development, that you have now an alternative to keep your forests and still develop. The reality today is forests are worth more cut down than standing up. So I think we need to solve that problem, and that is a much better solution. Together with the works that the other commodities are doing, I think combined we will solve the issue of deforestation. If we have the global solution on avoided deforestation and the efforts made by palm oil, by soy, by cotton, and so on and so forth.
Well, I'm sure a lot of our viewers hope so too. Daryl, we just have about 15 minutes to go, so I do want to talk about CSPO, Certified Sustainable Palm Oil, and about the summit coming up tomorrow. As you mentioned, currently 17% of product on the market is certified, but only 50% of that is being bought. I do want to mention that this is an issue that's not simply related to palm oil. It applies to a lot of other commodities like cocoa and tea and sugar, where a lot of the certified product on the market is not being sold as such. But since we're talking about palm oil, we'll stick to that. Why hasn't demand kept up with supply of CSPO?
Well, there are some technical reasons. I think the biggest technical reason is logistics. A lot of people were, if they want to talk about physical supply, they need to solve the logistical question. How do you bring in this physical supply from the ports of Indonesia, from the ports of Malaysia to London, let's say? So I think that's something that is an issue because we're still a niche. Let me say at 17%, we're still considered niche. So it's not a commodity yet, and because it's not a commodity, you're going to have logistical challenges on how to organize the right ship to be at the right time, to carry the right quantity, to supply to the right person, requiring this derivative of palm oil. So it's going to be difficult, but it needs mindset change, and it needs some more long-term planning, and it needs collaboration at the country level, which is what the Dutch industry, the British industry, and so on and so forth are doing. They came together as industries to find out how they can overcome these logistical constraints. So that's one reason. The other reason is I call, and this is a reason prevalent these days in solving the big problems of the world, is the reason that I will only do what's necessary if my neighbor does it. And this is a big problem I have. People are waiting for somebody else to do it rather than do it themselves. And this is my big frustration, because it can be solved by individuals or individual companies. The individual companies need not wait, or individual countries need not wait for another country to do it. They need not wait for India and China to solve the problem. You can do it yourself first, and then inspire India and China. So I think those are the big reasons why demand has not met up with supply. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I was just going to say, speaking of India and China, together they make up, a third of palm oil imports. So what is being done in particular targeting them to get them on board sustainable produced palm oil?
I think India and China will be interesting markets and challenging markets for the RSPO to enter. We are already there, of course. We have members already in India and China. We're getting more and more members coming in from India and China. But we are still far from having a solution in India and China. What I think will happen, or what I hope will happen, is markets in Europe, markets in the US, markets in Oceania, markets in Indonesia inspire India and China to take strong action. What I also hope to achieve is that the multinationals in Europe, in US, in Oceania, in Indonesia, who are also operating in China, start to use certified sustainable palm oil, and then create an Indian story, a Chinese story about the use of certified sustainable palm oil in those countries. Now, with the combination of these happenings, I think India and China will flip and will transform towards consumption of certified sustainable palm oil.
What about the new EU regulation that's coming in at the end of the year? The EU food labeling or food information to consumer regulation coming into the EU at the end of the year. How might that affect the uptake of CSPO?
Well, I think it's going to affect positively the consumption of certified sustainable palm oil. We already see a strong demand coming in the first quarter of this year. In fact, we had record demand the first quarter of this year. And we hope to see this demand rise substantially in 2015. I think many of the consumer goods manufacturers are hoping to be able to communicate to the masses that they also have certified sustainable palm oil in their products. And I think that's a good thing.
Speaking of the masses, Daryl, if we go to the UK, only 3% of consumers recognize the RSPO logo on product. That's quite low. So what's being done in general to increase awareness amongst everyday consumers?
I think to reach out to the individual consumers will be a big challenge for the RSPO. But what we hope to achieve, how we hope to touch the consumer is through our ambassadors in Europe, which is the consumer goods manufacturers and the retailers. Once they start to have certified sustainable palm oil in the products, once they start to communicate this, I think more and more consumers will understand what RSPO is and hopefully appreciate what the RSPO is trying to do. So I think, yes, brand recognition is low, and we hope that our ambassadors can help us bridge this. And the other reason why it's low also is palm oil is almost an invisible ingredient in many products. I mean, in chocolates, for example, when you look at a bar of chocolate, you don't think palm oil, you think cocoa, you think sugar, you think hazelnuts in the chocolate, for example, and so on. You don't think palm oil. So that's why I guess recognition of RSPO or palm oil is going to be low, and we need to work hard to improve that.
And tomorrow at the summit, you're going to be talking about CSPO and how it's a shared responsibility. What are some of the main themes and the main takeaways you're hoping to achieve?
Well, I'm hoping that the attendees will understand that we have a shared responsibility to achieve market transformation. The RSPO, me, the secretariat, my team, does not exist for the sake of existing. We exist because the stakeholders around the palm oil supply chain want us to exist, want us to provide a solution. Now, we can only be a solution if the members who wanted us to begin with work hard towards achieving the solution. And it must be a shared responsibility. Now, I think we need to send that message clearly, and we need to work towards synchronizing our efforts properly so that we can move forward in a more efficient manner across all markets.
And I just want to take a few questions that we have received from some of our viewers. We have one coming from, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Yaneke, who is asking what actions has the RSPO taken or will be taking to get governments on board?
We have multiple discussions with governments. I just came back from Cancun, Mexico, where I was delivering a presentation to more than 100 countries of ministers and government officials, advocating to them this idea of landscape level planning for large-scale agriculture. I am really worried, to be in truth, about expansion into the new frontiers of Africa and Latin America, and not just on palm oil, on the other commodities. There is so many things that could go wrong, and I think proactiveness from governments is required, and that's why I go and spend time communicating this to governments. We know of governments who, of course, trying to find ways to see how their policies could be shaped mirroring ours, using our tools, which I think is great. I mean, you need not necessarily use the RSPO tools, but at least understand the issues through engaging with RSPO. Sometimes the issues, I call it the unintended consequences of good intent. Sometimes, right? You intend to develop a country through large-scale agriculture, through oil palm because it's proven, but then you forget that oil palm development needs workers. And where are you going to get the workers from? Are you going to get it from the local communities, or are you going to import some workers from another country or another tribe, which could then be a potential case for conflict, social conflict, and so on and so forth. Good intention, but may have unintended negative consequences, and that's something that RSPO can share.
And Daryl, I wanted to ask you, I mean, speaking of government and national initiatives, are you looking to collaborate as well with the Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil Initiative?
We are already working together with the Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil in the sense that we want to make sure that our producers, the producer members of RSPO, are not burdened unduly with extra costs having two certifications, because the Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil is a legal requirement and the RSPO certification is a voluntary certification. So we want to ensure that both these certifications can happen or at the management unit level, but at a cost that is not unduly prohibitive. So I think what we're trying to do is trying to find ways to have dual, not dual certificates, but try to have a tool for auditors to come in on the ground and do a check for both certification at the same time.
Let me take a few more questions because we have a few more minutes. I have one from Marcus, which is asking, in addition to Global Forest Watch initiative, which you mentioned earlier, Daryl, which is a great move forward, how else can the use of technology improve transparency across the supply chain?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not you know, I like to say I'm a geek, but I don't have the time to explore this. But I think added transparency is necessary, and you know, the RSPO as a platform gives you that transparency. For example, all our members across the supply chain have to submit annual communications on progress. So in those reports, you will see what are their consumption of palm oil in a year and how much have they covered that consumption with certified sustainable palm oil. And as a stakeholder, you can come into our website and you yourself can analyze just who is living up to their commitments and who aren't, or who aren't moving fast enough. All that is available. Now, if you want to use that and turn it into an app, for example, that could be done, I guess, but we are not at that stage. But I know stakeholders who are looking in RSPO are thinking about this already, how to leverage what we have made transparent on our website into something more digestible to the common person.
All right, one last question for you, Daryl, coming from Sophie, who's asking, what would you consider the most important barriers for growers to get their plantations certified, and what are the drivers for growers to certify their plantations?
Contrary to popular belief, I think that the biggest barrier is a mindset change. And it's hard for any industry. I mean, we see this across all industries. There's this belief system that you know all the issues and therefore you have all the solutions. It's not until you come into a multi-stakeholder initiative like the RSPO, then you understand, hey, I don't know all the issues, so therefore I can't solve all the problems. So that's the first thing, mindset change, accepting that you could be wrong, accepting that you don't know all the issues, accepting that you don't have all the solutions. That's the biggest barrier. And you know, once you do that at the highest level, at the CEO level, at the board of directors levels, at the shareholders levels, then the rest will be easier, I think. But the biggest thing is mindset change at the highest levels. And the second barrier is translating that mindset change all the way to the guy who drives the bulldozer, who pushes over a tree. Now, I think that's the big problem. Sending this communication from the board level to the lowest levels, so that you can avoid bad behavior, or not avoid bad behavior, but encourage good behavior.
Okay, Daryl, thank you very much. I think we'll leave it at that. It's a good thought to finish on, sending the message across the entire supply chain, which I know is no easy task. So thank you very much, Daryl, for being with us today. I'd also like to remind everyone who's been watching us that you are able to watch this live interview on our webpage, on our homepage at betterpalmoildebate.org. So make sure you do tune in and you do share it. And Daryl, well, have a great summit tomorrow.
Yes, thank you very much, Nadine. It was a pleasure. Thank you all for watching this, and you know, feel free to contact the RSPO if you need more clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.